Hi, everyone, and welcome to Cooking and Preserving Wild Mushrooms with Chef Bruce Worden. This is part of Fungus Among Us, our festival that had to change a bit this year. We had some talks last night. We had a photo show, and now a photo contest, and now this is our final event. Before I start, I wanted to acknowledge that we're here at Myrtle Phillip, and we are on the traditional unceded territory, overlapping traditional territory of Squamish Nation and Lowat Nation. We couldn't run Fungus Among Us without our supporters. We would like to say a huge thank you to the Whistler Community Foundation, Aware, the Resort Municipality of Whistler. Definitely a huge thank you for Nesters. They're the ones who helped out with all the food that you're going to see today in the cooking show. And also we had Armchair Books, the Bike Co, and Milestones support us. So we have a great show planned for you. Bruce is going to be here with you. He is the general manager of Milestones, and not only is he an amazing chef, he knows so much about mushrooms and gathering and preserving, and it's fabulous. I've watched him every year for so many years, and I keep learning something new every time. So if you tuned in last night, this is going to be a little bit different. I'm also here with Sabrina, a fellow board member, and we're going to be looking at the questions as they come in, either through Zoom or through Facebook, and we're going to ask Bruce right away. And this is going to be as interactive as possible. So yeah, so shout it out there, and then we'll try and get everybody's question. I mean, we'll do our best anyways. And Bruce is going to start us off, I think. Bruce, are you ready to go? Okay, here's Bruce. One sec. Just one sec.
Hello everyone, as Christina mentioned, I'm Bruce. I've been doing this since 2015 with the crew at the Whistler Naturalists, and it's awesome. This is kind of a new year and a new format, but you know, we'll do it. We'll cook mushrooms and we'll learn a lot. So got my daughter Kira helping me out today as my second set of hands in the kitchen for the things that I don't get off camera. But Ponderosa and Nesters, huge sponsors and huge suppliers, and helped us with all of this. And the mushrooms I couldn't gather locally, we were able to get from further reaches of BC, so we're pretty excited about that. So a little bit about mushrooms. Since I moved here, I've just been enthralled with the fact that all this food is in the forest floor, and it's literally 10 minutes to an hour from my doorstep. So you know, from about July right until the end of October into November, we're just doing a lot of walks in the forest and collecting mushrooms. And the whole purpose of this is sometimes you just find too many, and what do you do with them? And I wanted to show you some of those things, from the cleaning to the cooking, and ways to put them in your fridge, freezer, pantry, whichever you'd like to do. So I've supplied a couple of recipes. We had, I think there's 4 recipes. I'm going to show you a bunch of other things, so feel free to write stuff down if you want to, or just, I think it's going to be recorded, so you can always revisit, but definitely we'll be in touch through the Naturalist and talk about those kind of things. So trees are definitely a major player in mycelium and the mushrooms. So before you get out into the forest, there's always questions of what to look for. What do I do? You see a lot of the groups inundated with, you know, where do I find these? What tree, what forest do I go to? Ultimately, there's so much on the internet already about it. A couple of good friends that know a little bit, meet some people, and if you don't, drive down a logging road, look for some forest, get in there and start looking around. The edibility piece is obviously not necessarily need to be left to apps. There's lots of groups that will help you with identification, but ultimately know what you know before you eat it. So I'm going to go through kind of a little bit of what we got here. The recipes that I provided are specifically with one mushroom, but that doesn't mean that you can't. I try to provide recipes that you could use your favorite mushroom in. So as you go through them, just because we do a lobster compound butter doesn't mean it's not a chanterelle or a blue chanterelle or a pine mushroom. So it's all about keeping the season in a vehicle that you can use for cooking throughout the winter and holding on to the goods. So a little bit quickly, I'm just going to go through a little bit about what we have, and then we'll get into some cooking. But once I get in through this section, again, as Christina mentioned, we're going to do questions on the fly, and we're going to know what's going on, and we're going to answer them for you. So these two here are probably currently the most two that you'll find. We have the golden chanterelle, and we have the white chanterelle. Okay, we'll go over here. So we have the golden and white chanterelle. So you'll see how the gills go down, and they're actually false gills. So they run right down to the stem, and they don't actually become decurrent. There's no actual stem visible. So this is white chanterelle, super meaty, one of my favorite mushrooms just because they're not overly picked, because they're not prized by a lot, but they are fantastic for preserving and holding on to. And the golden chanterelle is a prized treat for restaurants and mushroom people alike. And then we have here our lobster mushrooms, an unknown favorite, but they dry really well. They're fantastically tasty. And they just, you know, you can't really miss them if you get out there. They're kind of one of a kind. Just going over here, we're in chanterelle land, so I'm going to pull these out. These are a little bit more difficult to find and a little bit, they're quite easy to know, but they're a little bit more difficult to find because they grow in clusters and they're dark, so they hide really, really well. But again, you can see the false gills. So these are known as the blue chanterelle, which is the layman's term. I'll let you look up all the Latin stuff because that'll be part of your learning before you get out in the woods. But they're fantastic for cooking and they got a great flavor. One suggestion we'll talk in a little bit, but make sure you cook them separately so they don't black out the rest of your food. And then we've got the spreader or the hedgehog. This is a larger version. There's a belly button hedgehog, which is smaller, and it'll still have these little comb tooth. So that's really what we're after. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out where the camera is here. That's really what you're looking for, is that little comb tooth. So the beige ones that have that, relatively safe to go. If you're walking through the forest in the moss and you happen to see something that looks like a little silver dollar pancake, that's usually my go-to. And then turn over to the underside. If you have that, you found yourself a hedgehog. Growing currently and well sought after by all over the world are these, the matsutake. They're not actually the true matsutake that grow in Japan, but a lot of BC matsutake gets sent over to Japan because we just have a lot more producing here, and a little bit of improper foraging where people raked the ground and stuff destroyed some of the mycelium, so we end up dealing with a lot more here and sending them over. And then one of my personal favorites is the hericium, both for medicinal and for eating. This one I just treat like the flakiest white fish you could, and anything that you want to make fish with, you basically, we'll talk about that, but this is basically fish, but it's a mushroom. And then another fun one, these are few and far between. When you find them, remember where they are because you'll see them again. Every year, every second year, they'll come back. These are the cauliflower mushroom, usually on dead stumps or on the ground just above a dead stump. These are fantastic and a lot of fun to cook and look at and play with. We'll talk, but you can make noodles, you can do a bunch of stuff. So once we get in a little bit later, we'll talk about all the things that I like to do with these. And then finally, for fun, Joe at Ponderosa, I don't know if I can fit this one on the screen, maybe I'll use the other one. He gave me a wonderful Western giant studded puffball. And if you've never had a puffball, this is really big. But inside, they're spongy like tofu, and you can basically treat them like that. They do a little bit of shrinkage. It is 95% water, remember that. So know where you've picked this from because it's gonna have a lot of the elements that are in the ground soaked into this one. So a lot of fun. We'll cut that up a little bit later, but that's pretty much the mushrooms that I've got from BC. And then just for fun, you can't smell it, so it's not as exciting, but I got a little truffle from Burgundy so that if people don't know what it looks like or want to see what the inside, will go through that. And the people that are here are going to really enjoy the dishes with that in it. All righty. So I'm going to start with the compound butter. So the issue you've been presented with is that you've found a mushroom that you know is edible, and you see them all around you, and you really don't want to stop picking because you're there, you've walked an hour into the bush, but You may not get back there, somebody may take them. So you want to pick a couple of them and you end up with too many. So that's kind of where we're at. So I'm going to take a lobster mushroom, which is here. I'm going to, just for argument's sake, I'm going to use the lobster mushroom for the compound butter. So if you have the recipe or you don't, ultimately a compound butter is a whipped butter. So we've whipped up the butter with the mixer, and we're going to fold a bunch of flavored ingredients into it. We're going to use some shallots, use some chives, some parsley, a little bit of thyme, and then we'll use lobster mushrooms. So we're going to dice this up nice and small. Again, what you want to look at with a lobster mushroom, I'll show you here. So you've got a little bit of graying. The graying is okay. What you don't want to see is any wormholes or any bugs crawling around. You know it's gone prime, past prime. So at any point when I'm cutting and stuff, I mean, not that I'm going to stop talking, but if you have a question during that time, it's probably the time to ask so that we can just make sure I get to as many questions as possible for you guys. But we're just going to cut this up nice and small. So the one thing about lobster mushrooms is that they don't really shrink a lot. A lot of mushrooms lose a lot of their volume in cooking, and lobster mushrooms don't. They stay pretty true to size. So you want to cut them up the size that you want them to go into your butter or your dish. Doesn't have to be perfect. Again, when we reheat this with the butter, this will be used when it comes out of the freezer, because you can freeze it for the season. You can use it into pastas. You can use it into risottos, anything that you want to flavor things with. So we're going to cut all these up before we cook them. And speaking about the moisture, when you're doing mushrooms or compound butters, you want to make sure that the ingredients you put into the compound butter have most of the moisture cooked out. So you'll want to sweat everything, build a nice sort of aromatic base. You're going to cool that down and you're going to fold it into the butter. And then you'll just roll it in saran wrap or in wax paper and then put it into the freezer. So back here, I've got a pan cooking. You're not going to be able to see this part, so it's not super exciting, but I'll pull it over to the page when I'm cooking. Take a little bit of butter. Spoon. Yes. All right, so we'll get that warming up. So as I said, we're going to cook these up with some shallots and a little bit of garlic. So when we're doing this, we want to sweat. We don't want to caramelize anything. The mushrooms typically like a high heat, but because we're trying to preserve the flavor, we're going to cook them just until the moisture comes out and then starts to pull back into the sauce, and then we'll cool that down together and fold that into the butter. Here we are. First day with a new stove here, but we'll get there. Any questions about this so far? It's pretty straightforward, but you know, I threw a little bit at you. Any questions about the mushrooms or so would be a good time. Amazing. We have a listener. Well, if you caramelize them, it's fine. I just, caramelizing them sometimes with the garlic especially will go a little bit bitter. So the flavor will transpose into the butter. Caramelizing the onions, you could do caramelized onions in it as well. It'll definitely add flavor. It's just more so the garlic. You just want to avoid that bitterness that it brings when you burn it. So I'm just going to start with, I'm going to start with my shallots. So the shallots I'm going to sweat until they're translucent, which is just semi-see-through. And once they get see-through, I'll put the garlic in just before the mushrooms. Thanks, Kara. And just a pinch of garlic, sure.
So, all right, we have another question, which is,
yep.
Are there other edibles and easily found mushrooms that keep their volume like the lobsters?
Well, the pine mushrooms do pretty well. They lose probably to about 60%. Chanterelles tend to really cook down. The cauliflower mushroom, albeit probably wouldn't use it for a butter, it'll hold its shape and size as well.
Another question for you, Bruce.
Perfect. Let's keep them going.
I picked some light-colored lobsters last Wednesday, and they don't taste like seafood. Smile,
Yeah.
Frowny face. It was my first time cooking them.
Yeah. So the white lobsters, although edible, they just haven't gathered as much of the parasite, and that's a lot of people get stuck on the flavor of the lobster, so they get the red ones. The darker red they are, the further along they are. So you'll find that you lose a lot of them to bugs. So you'll just cut the edible portions. The white ones, though, they have a nice flavor. They're just not as seafood-like. I mean, I mix them in with a little bit of red. And if you only find the white, they're still an edible mushroom and they're great tasting, but they're not going to taste as much seafood. So perhaps if you wanted to add something that may make it like Old Bay, might have a little bit more of like that fish cake type flavor. But ultimately, just the red ones are going to taste a little bit more fishy. I think the color, the lobster idea is more about the big tail hanging in the forest, and you see these massive lobster tails sticking out of the ground. There is, much like the shrimp rusula, that does have sort of a seafood flavor when you cook it, but you know, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I just know butter and that lobster mushroom, if it's good and red and nice and white inside, you get a really good sort of that sort of land lobster taste and flavor. What am I doing here? Yeah, it's cooking. A little bit slower on
Another
the burner.
question, Bruce.
Perfect. Thank you.
Boletes, are they good in compound butter too?
Yeah, absolutely. Boletes, because they're so, they're just great to cook fresh. But yes, definitely if you had, say, a large bolete and it wasn't necessarily enough to cook, but you wanted to put that flavor in, same process. So they're going to lose volume. So I would cut them up nice and small, cook them off in the butter, everything else with the herbs and such, and then put them into the butter. But definitely they would add a lot of flavor to them for sure. They're quite flavorful once cooked. The other way you could do with boletes to put in the compound butter is to dry them in the oven for a little bit and then chop them all up and put them in, because they'll have a little bit more of a nutty flavor and a little bit more of an earthy flavor once dried. Put them into the butter. This just isn't cooking fast, eh? What's up? Yeah. All right. Sorry, guys. We're just waiting for this to cook up. So ultimately, I'll show you. So we're just sweating that out. What we want to do is sweat this just until they, you see, they don't lose a lot of volume. But we're not going to color them. We're just going to get them ready and fold them into the butter. So while I'm working on that, oh, sure. We're learning. So I'll go here for now. So I'm not exactly sure how the camera to camera works. So if you want to see something closer up, I'll just get like this from them and I'll move on over. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put some fresh herbs in. So the fresh herbs, I don't like to cook into the butter, just because you're going to reheat the butter with another dish. So the herbs will cook in the finished dish. So we've got that with flat leaf parsley. You can use curly parsley or flat leaf, whichever you'd like. I'm going to put chives in here. Some of my favorite herbs with them, obviously thyme, parsley, chives. Thyme being a little bit more woody, I'm going to put in with the mushrooms. And just a pinch. So salt. I buy unsalted butter so I can control the amount of salt I put into it when I make the compound butters or any cooking. I've chosen a smoked sea salt Malden. You can just use plain if you don't, but if you prefer that. And we're just going to put that in. Try and crush it up pretty fine, because the salt, there's no moisture in it other than what you're putting it in or putting in it. So the crystals will stay quite large. So if you use kosher salt into the butter, you're going to see crystals of the salt stuck in the butter. Spatula go? We're learning. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, now we've got some heat going. So now I'm just going to show you this here. Can I switch here? Did it switch? Amazing. So you can see the moisture coming out of them now. So really key point, when the moisture starts to come out of the mushrooms, that's your key point when you want to play with flavors and such, because it will all come out. And then as you cook further, it'll all go back in. So once that moisture comes out, you put your sauces and your flavorings and everything in that. And then everything else will sort of caramelize and reconstitute itself back into the mushroom, which is, it's pretty great. I'm going to sweat them just a little bit longer. Now you can't smell it, but this one, to your point, being red, does have a little bit more of the lobster smell. And I think the butter really helps with that, as well as the shallots, because they're a little bit sweeter. So it brings all that together, and finish it with any herbs that you like with lobster. And you'll always sort of get that umami and that sense in your head that it's going to taste like seafood. So I'm just going to fold this through. I'm going to flip over here for a quick second. So I just want to show you this here. You want to fold that through just so it mixes nice and uniform. And now if I put the mushrooms obviously in here right now, we're just going to have a melting swirl of melted butter. So we're going to cool those lobster mushrooms off before we put them in there. So we'll just go back to that in a moment once we get the lobsters finished. All right. So at this point, I've got all the flavor in the liquid. We're going to cool this off with the liquid. All that oil and the shallots and the garlic is all going to be super flavorful, and we're going to put that back into the butter once it's cooled, and we can freeze it, use it right away, whatever you'd like to do, but it's a great way to conserve a lot of mushrooms. Yeah, perfect. So we'll just give that about 5 minutes or so in the fridge, and then we'll come back to that. So as mentioned, you can do that with any of these mushrooms. So chanterelles, for example, the white chanterelles, I like to just pull them apart. I don't do a lot of cutting with these. I just pull them apart. Really versatile for a lot of different ways, and it saves a lot of knife space, but also you get a nice consistent pull with that, and it's kind of therapeutic just to pull them apart like this. And this technique here of pulling them apart works for the white chanterelle, as well the golden. It'll do the same thing. So you just pull it apart like that. And with the bigger ones, you do it this way. If you want to chop or leave the other ones smaller, that's totally fine as well. Okay, just wanted to show you a little bit about that. So while we're waiting for the lobsters to cool, before we start the next recipe, this plan here, doing this with these mushrooms, when you get a lot of chanterelles, both the white or the golden, I treat this like any meat, like a chicken, or treat it like, you know, because it'll cook up, it'll be like a dark meat. It won't be quite like a white meat because it'll be a little bit softer and stuff. But so any like chicken recipes you have that you love, and even if you don't eat chicken and you want to make something and eat like chicken, so you can do your pulled pork like this. You could do like barbecue chicken sandwich. You can do a buffalo chicken sandwich. And it's just great because if you only find 5, you're going to have a great dinner. And if you find 25, you can do all these different things and get them into your freezer and fridge. That's good there. Perfect. All right. So anyone luck with white chanterelles and golden chanterelles? For those of you, I'm not sure where everybody's from. So, you know, they grow, the golden chanterelles and variations of chanterelles go right across the country. Locally in BC, these white chanterelles all the way up the sea to sky. They're kind of not necessarily 100% unique to BC, but the Pacific Northwest, you know, you'll find more of the rainbows and the golden chanterelles in other locations where the white chanterelles are specifically in and around the Pacific Northwest. Okay, so for prep for mushrooms, I'm just going to put these here. Let's see how these lobster mushrooms are doing. Again, it doesn't have to be cold, but you just don't want the heat from the pan to melt all the butter. I'm just going to put all that straight in here. All right, just give that a rinse for me. Okay. So I'm going to just do that under here just so everyone can see what that looks like in here. And you're just going to push it around. So if you have a KitchenAid, you can definitely use that to do this portion if you don't want to do by hand, but depending on how much you're making. This is great, as I said, for you could whip a whole bunch of butter and make 4 or 5 different types and have that ready for all your cooking needs later on in the season or right away. So you see it's softening up a little bit, but that will all harden back up, and all of that liquor from the pan is in there and just adding a ton of flavor in there. Okay, so that's your compound butter. You can put it into dishes or bowls or ice cube trays, whatever you'd like. I find it easiest just to wrap it in a little bit of parchment paper or wax paper in a round. And then that way you can just cut it similar to like a maitre d'hotel butter, and you can just put that on or in anything that you're cooking. Okay, any questions on the compound butter? Pretty straightforward, super tasty, and really versatile. So as we go through, as mentioned, I really want to play with the versatility of mushrooms as a great protein and alternate forest floor food. Okay, so we're going to use that a little bit later to do some cooking. I just wanted to get that out of the way. So we've got a couple more dishes now in your recipes, if I recall. Yeah, we got one?
Nope, just someone said the compound butter looks amazing, excited to try it. Awesome,
yeah, hope you enjoy it. Very versatile though, and it's literally just a nice little slice, put it on things, put it in things, pastas and everywhere, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be one of your favorites for sure. So for the next dish that I'm gonna be making, we're gonna do the cassoulet. So the cassoulet is a French sort of peasant dish that a lot of people have turned into fine dining bases for meat dishes and all that kind of stuff. Typically would have sausage or bacon and such in there. I'm just gonna play with a myriad of mushrooms. You know, lobster chanterelles, and I've got these blue chanterelles. We're gonna put them all in. We're gonna cook them all a little bit separate. And then we'll put them aside, cook them all, and then we're just gonna put them in, and we're gonna fold them in with some cannellini beans. I've put some potatoes and carrots into it instead, just so it's a little bit meatier, has just a different texture, because texture is another thing that really helps the division of the mushrooms and the flavors of. So with the blue chanterelles, these are, they grow out of a cluster, and this cluster portion is a little bit, it's not necessarily tough, but it's not as desirable as the rest of the mushroom. So I usually just sort of go at you would like cauliflower or cabbage where the center is, and just cut away from the center. As you can see, I'm gonna pan over to this one here. It's quite dense into the base of that, whereas the top is nice and delicate. So that's what we want to use, is the top part where it's a little bit more delicate. All right, so you'll be left with this. If this is clean, by all means, you know, use it for a mushroom stock. And that's the thing with all trim, as long as you have clean trim, you know, 30-minute quick dashi or a mushroom stock, you can just use all your trim, make that, and again, freeze that, or use it for the same dinner. So again, with the chanterelles, I'm just gonna pull these apart like this. I'm just gonna get a little butter. Can you get from the fridge? There's nice butter in there. Just put 2 or 3 nubs in here, please. Yeah, big pan, perfect. So we're just gonna do the blacks up, or the blues rather. They're a little bit more black, but they call them blue chanterelles. Anybody find out the Latin name on these yet? Anybody doing research while we're watching? This is kind of strange. I was always talking in front of a bunch of people and always told to imagine people in their underwear, and now you're watching from home, so it's very possible you are in your underwear. Makes it a little easier for me to figure that out. Okay, so is the butter in there? Perfect. So a cast iron pan, definitely one of my favorite vehicles to cook mushrooms in, both for the high heat aspect, so you really sort of seal all the flavors in, as well as just using it over and over again. It stays hot, and it keeps that high heat on the mushroom, because if you've ever cooked mushrooms on a high heat, and then you cool the pan down too much, it gets really kind of slimy and a little bit rubbery, and I like to avoid that when cooking mushrooms.
Hey, Bruce, someone does say that they're in their underwear.
Hope you're enjoying it. So again, shallots, a little bit of garlic. Shallots, garlic, and herbs, I mean, both for just the fragrance as well as they just go so well with mushrooms. So I'm always, if I got a bunch of mushrooms, I'm always buying a bunch of shallots, a lot of garlic, and a lot of herbs, and we just put it all together, and it just, the smell and the fragrance just makes everything so much better. Just gonna take some tarragon, just the whole stem, and I'm just gonna drop that in. Tarragon goes really well with mushrooms, and I'm sure if you haven't had it, it's got a little bit of licorice flavor. It just adds a nice sort of depth of flavor to any dishes. So with the cassoulet, we're going to take all the different mushrooms cooked separately and put them in and sort of stew them together really quickly so they still have their integrity, but at the same time, they meld together one fantastic flavor. So we're going to need a couple plates for all the different mushrooms. Put them aside. So we got over here. Just want to show, I think, yeah, there we are. So this is the mushrooms. So you see they're still nice and sizzly. You can't smell that tarragon, but I wish you could. It smells amazing. We're just going to pull those off. They are going to cook a little farther, so I don't want to take them too far because I want them to, the flavor to come back into the dish. Butter? Yeah, just leave that out. We'll just use this for each. So the next one I'm going to put in here is the chanterelles, both golden and white. And as I said, we're just going to pull them apart, nice and simple. And this will probably be enough for the time being. We'll get the pan hot and we'll put those in. Awesome. All right, so there they go. And you notice I'm not salting any of the mushrooms right now because I'm going to put them into the dish together. The base for the cassoulet will be there, and I'm going to season it all together rather than individually so I don't oversalt the finished dish because it's going to have a little liquid, and the salt is obviously going to potentially overpower if I salt everything. All right. Yeah, we're just going to get through that. So again, any of these dishes, although I made them without meat, because I want the mushrooms to be the focus as I typically do for this event, you can make traditional cassoulet and add all the mushrooms. You can do whatever you'd like when it comes to cooking at home. So I am going to add a matsutake into this, just because it adds a great level of flavor. So if you're picking a matsutake, there are a couple that look like this, and you, again, do your research, because this is kind of everybody's favorite to look for. And when you find them, these are number 2s or number 3s kind of utility. You'll find little buttons, and they'll be number 1s, and that's kind of the prized one for all the soups, because you get nice, beautiful slices of the small mushrooms in the broths and in the dishes and on top of the dishes, because it's one of the few wild mushrooms that you can eat raw. Not everybody does, but you can eat these ones raw, but very small amounts. Okay. So we're just going to take this and peel off all of the browning. So when you find these, they're going to be white when they come out. As you take them out of the ground, they will start to brown. So that's one distinct difference because of the staining versus, say, a Amanita or a Rucola. You're going to see the difference in that. So do some research on them, but they're a fantastic find. When you find them, you're going to get really excited, because if you love them, get excited when you find them. And the smaller ones under the ground, or the little sort of mushrooms, the little bumps under the moss, that's where you can do a lot of damage. So what you want to do is you feel around, rather than raking and scratching, you want to feel around for the bumps, peel the moss back and pluck it out. It'll have a little bit of diatomaceous earth at the bottom, which is this little sort of gray stuff. I don't know if I missed, yeah. So a little bit of gray dirt, and that's kind of where the mushroom starts from. And that's what you can pluck it out, the whole thing, but you don't, show it again, yeah? Sure, so right here, so it's a little bit gray, right on the end of the stem. You can see on that one as well, over there you go. And you want to keep that on, and if you find a lot of them, you want to keep that on for identification, because you might get overzealous and pick a bunch of them when one might not be the right mushroom. So you just keep that on where you're going. So you peel it all down. The stem on these are very, very tough. So the cap, that's why when you get the small ones, the number 1s, the entire mushroom is soft and delicate. Whereas you get a little bit older, it's a lot about flavoring, and it's a little bit more stringy and fibrous on the cap, or the stem rather. So I'm just going to cut off here. So you can see here, I'm going to show you, these are wormholes. Okay, so when you get into number 2s and 3s, they're still edible. It's just extra protein, if you will. But the other reason here is that all of the moisture with the stem as it ages, all of the cell structures that's going linear, It's warm and it's porous from the moisture leaving. So you can almost break it apart like that. High heat? Yeah, we're good. Awesome. Thanks, Kira. So we've got the chanterelles ready. I want to show you them. Multitasking. You're all right with that at home? You're okay with the multitasking? Okay, perfect. So here's the chanterelles here. So again, a little bit of color on them, high heat, not a lot of liquid in the pan, because that'll come out once we hit the liquid with everything together. So I'll just put this to the side. So when adding the pine mushroom, which we're putting next, it's very strong. A little more butter, please. And quite pungent, which is why it's prized for the umami and the flavor that comes with it. I'm just going to come over here again, just to try and show you all the bits and pieces of it. We're just going to peel it back, similar like you would for a portobello for marinating. You don't have to, but it saves putting water on the mushrooms. There's a lot of talk about not putting water on wild mushrooms. So you always want to find a way to use as little water as possible to clean them. The one exception I've found with getting scads and scads of lobsters is they're not really affected too much on the top where most of the dirt hangs out with the lobsters, but the underneath, so someone was mentioning the white lobsters versus the red, that red underneath is where you're going to get that lobster flavor from. So that's probably why you didn't really get what you were looking for. Now we're just going to dice this up. Pine mushroom being very strong, we're not going to put as much in. So nice fine dice. And we're going to remove the stem on this one because it's a little bit woody. And just a small dice. And we've got the butter ready behind us. Perfect. All right. We're going to cook these up. So your kitchen's going to smell amazing when you're doing this because of all the aromatics and the herbs that and the mushrooms smell incredible on their own. And if you have your favorite, you can just do this with one mushroom. I just thought it would be nice to sort of show you the difference with all the different types and really eat everything in it. So I'm going to go to that lobster like I was telling you. So in here, you can brush dry because these are quite dirty. They grow right under and they push up and the moss stays on them. A lot of times bugs, this is where they go in, they'll lay eggs and such. So you want to crack them open once you get them home. And this red here, the darker red, as they get bigger and a little bit more red, that's the kind of flavor that you're going to get. That parasite gives you that kind of almost like seafood type taste. Okay. This one here is probably a little bit far gone. You see the brown there? If you're into fabric and stuff, people are using these for dyeing clothes and stuff like that. So you can read up on that if that's something you're into. So, and then we're going to do, yeah, those are good to go. So I'll just show you the pine mushrooms here. And you can't smell these, but the smell of cinnamon and everything that comes off these is just fantastic. And it's just going to add a wonderful burst of flavor into our cassoulet. Not typically French, but we're making mushrooms. A little bit more butter in that. Olive oil and butter, yes. So when I'm cooking, because mushrooms like higher heat, I use butter. One thing butter does is froth and burn very quickly. Burn noisettes or what, you know, you burn the milk solids in it and you get a wonderful nutty flavor. I put a little bit of olive oil in there just to sort of break or lower the smoke point for the butter so you can get the mushrooms cooked a little bit hotter. Alternatively, you could use straight oil and any sort of alternate that you'd like to use, whatever your diet. We've got this here. So these are the lobsters, and I think we'll put this will be it that we put in. So that'll be 4 types that we put into it. A couple more shallots. All right. So now I've got the last mushroom in there. we're going to build the cassoulet. So just for time, I've taken some potatoes, some mini potatoes and carrots. I'll show you a little bit later, but I've roasted them ahead of time just because it takes about 35 minutes or so to roast those, and I didn't want to take up all your time waiting for carrots and potatoes. So back to the pan. We've got, can I just go over to this one here? So we've got, see how the moisture is starting to come out of them? That's where we want. We're going to put a couple more shallots in there. Little garlic. Okay, and then once we get that to the same point, we're going to add all of the wonderful mushrooms into that. All right. Well, it's smelling really good. Awesome. So I put that tarragon in there. I'm going to leave that whole stem of tarragon in there for the duration of the cooking. And just want to put a touch more thyme into that. Doesn't quite smell good enough. So I'm going to put that in there. And then these are the potatoes here that I had roasted up ahead of time. So I'm just going to put those in at this time. So everything going into the cassoulet is about 80% cooked. So it's a nice quick dish, so you don't lose a lot of, you get a little bit of melding. You can leave it longer, you can reheat it in the oven, but it's just a nice, typically the cassoulet, as I said, it'd be put in the oven, it'd be like your casserole or your slow cooker, and it'd be done when everybody gets home from work and everybody digs into the bean dish with all the sausage and stuff. And it's a really great dish to make after you go out hunting for mushrooms. So this is what the melange looks like. All of the mushrooms in there together, looking pretty awesome. We're gonna add, so if you're cooking with dry beans, which we've used canned for time, soak them overnight, cook them in your pressure cooker, or slow cook them in liquid, but reserve that liquid that you're cooking them in. You can put thyme and shallots and everything in there, and then you can really bolster the flavor of that with all the mushrooms, and everything will kind of come together in one big flavor. So I've got some vegetable stock here, which I made ahead of time. Pour a little bit in there, just enough to wet the bottom of the pan. When you hear the last little bit of sizzle, you've got the whole pan deglazed with that. And for fun, because I really like it, I'm just going to put some sherry vinegar in there. Just a splash. Give that a good stir. We talked about the smoked sea salt. Again, mushrooms, I really liked the idea of smoking mushrooms, but I don't have a smoker, and this adds a beautiful flavor and adds that kind of thing that you're missing from like roasting meat and stuff. So it gives you the kind of the flavor that you're looking for, but you know, you can kind of feed everybody with it, not just the people that eat meat. All right. So a little bit of liquid just to this point. What I was saying, you want to put the liquid in just until it glazed the bottom. So what's happened there is once I put that liquid in there, it's heated up the mushrooms because they were hot before the liquid, and now it's pulled all the mushrooms into the base. So we've got a fond, or sort of like a stock in the bottom of all that, and that'll lacquer up over the beans, and it's going to be amazing. So cannellini beans. So as mentioned, I'm using canned, cooked them ahead of time. The one thing I would say is don't necessarily salt your beans when they're cooking, because the salt will kind of get them, keep them a little bit firmer as cooking. So you salt right at the end or when you finish the dish. So the mushrooms are the star. Traditionally, the beans kind of would be the vehicle for the star, which would be the meat or whatever, but here it's mushrooms in case. So we're just going to stir that together. And now with the beans being cooked, we're just going to stir it just till it's warm through. And you have the veg stock on hand, so you can add a touch as you go, just to keep that moisture in the bottom of the pan, so you don't get you want those beans to stay nice and soft. And if you don't have enough moisture in the pan, they'll start to harden up, and you're not necessarily looking for that. All right, so we'll just let that get up to a temperature. We're going to add some chives. We're going to add some parsley. And truffle oil, because who doesn't love truffle oil? So what else could we use in here? So I'm going to use, so at the end of it, to bring the sauce together, we're going to monter au beurre, which is basically taking some cold butter, putting it and swirling it around, and you're just going to pull it all together. So I've chosen to make this gluten-free. So you could put flour if you wanted to, but the bean starch in the water that you cook in will be enough to sort of pull it together. And when you hit that knob of butter right at the end, it'll just add a nice sheen and a really good mouthfeel. And I think that's probably the best way to do it, just so it's more inclusive of everybody that's going to be at your party or just yourself. So right here, I've got a little bit of reduced cream. So this is 35% cream, and I've taken it and reduced it by 40%. In it, I have dried porcinis, thyme, shallots, and garlic. So it's another great, I guess, kind of like pantry staple in your fridge if you're cooking, to have a nice little batch of flavored reduced cream, because it doesn't take forever to reduce, and you've already got the captive flavors already in that. So we're just going to put a small nub of that in there. And you really don't need much, there's quite a bit of flavor in it. And we'll just stir that through. So I've just put a small amount in over to this one. Perfect. I'm just going to stir that through. So it just lightens it up a little bit, adds a little bit of luxurious texture in there. And you can't smell it, but that tarragon is just amazing. And then here, I'll just do this for now. So from this point, you got that? Perfect. I'm going to add my chives. You never want to be too sparse with chives. Parsley is a fantastic addition. A lot of people aren't super fond of it, but you got to learn to like it. And now this is our chance to use some butter here. So this is what the compound butter now looks like. So I'm going to take a nub of that. Never be shy. And now we're just going to melt that through, and then we're done. So it can be a very complicated traditional French dish, or you can take the whole idea of it and turn it into something nice and simple and wow all your friends and have your family super excited to eat mushrooms.
Bruce, I just got to say, I can smell that from here, and it's amazing.
Awesome. Awesome. So, that other way. And then, as I said, I got a little bit of potatoes in there. You can see all the different types of mushrooms in there. As many beans as you'd like. You can do a bigger bowl. I'm just going to put a smaller amount in here. And you build that up. Quick lid of salt. Some fresh chives. And that's cassoulet. Pretty straightforward. So, sorry you can't enjoy it, but thanks for coming. So that's the second dish that we got going on. So if there's any questions about that, it's a great time to ask while I do a little bit of a tidy. A little fresh tarragon, and we're good to go. So this is the part that I don't, not normally. Normally I hear the questions, and if there aren't any, that's totally fine. I'll just keep going, but I just thought I would cue you as when a good time to ask them is. Thank you. All right. So, is that the back one? Perfect. We have one. Amazing.
So yeah, a question came in. Do you need to pre-cook canned beans?
Well, if they're canned, they're already cooked. So you don't need to, but if you buy the dried beans, you want to soak them overnight and rinse the water a couple of times and then cook them, as I said, either in a pressure cooker or the bag will have some sort of definitive time to cook them. Ultimately, when they're cooked, they're going to be a little bit different than canned beans. They're going to be a little bit firmer, simply because the canned beans are cooked and then pasteurized in the can, so they're heated twice. So this is what the final bean would look like. And you can see, you can smash it, and you'll get the same texture out of yours with a pressure canner or a pressure cooker. It'll just take a little bit longer to cook the dried beans in your in a pot with water. So you just want to watch it a little bit, turn it on really low, and just let it go for a while. Okay. And you find like a baked bean recipe, you could do it right in the oven, but you want to make sure you pre-cook a little bit with the boil before you do that, because it'll take forever and you'll get all of the starch from the beans in the liquid. All right. We're doing good. We're doing great. So, so that's cassoulet and the compound butter. I have no idea what time it is. I guess we're what, just about an hour now? 4:51. Amazing. We're gonna do, the next dish we're going to do is going to be the mushrooms on toast. But instead of just doing mushrooms on toast, I thought I'd sort of play it up a little bit and do some poached eggs with it. So you can use it for a wonderful brunch. We're going to make a little bit of a Mornay sauce instead of just creamed mushrooms on toast. You can easily make this vegetarian or vegan with whatever alternate milk you want to use. You can do poached tofu or some avocado on the toast under the mushrooms, or you can just go for the awesome toast with the creamed mushrooms on it, which is equally amazing. So for this dish, I'm going to use the hedgehogs and chanterelles because they're both similar in taste and texture, but they both are quite rich in depth of flavor, and they both go well with cream sauces. Yeah.
Question came in, do certain fruits or dried fruits add better flavor than others in a recipe?
Dried fruits? Yeah, I guess it would depend. Are you talking dried fruits or dried mushroom fruit? Just to clarify, like dried prunes and raisins and such?
We're hoping the person will reply. So yeah, raisins, yes.
Yeah, so if you're making curries or longer cooked dishes, you know, fresh fruit is, again, like mushrooms, there's so much water in them that dried fruit tend to lend themselves to recipes a little bit better because you're going to actually reconstitute them in the cooking, and the natural sugars that have sort of shown up because of the dehydration, you're going to get more of that rather than the acid from the fruit in the water. So like if you take a fresh damson plum and then you take a prune, you're going to get better cooking results out of the prune because all the moisture's out and you're left with the residual flavor. Mind you, it's going to taste different, right? Because you have that sort of caramel and sort of deep sugar with the prune, and the fresh one, you're just going to have that fresh sugar and tart pucker. Okay?
The follow-up, she asks, any that pair well with mushrooms?
Fruit? I think you could try it out. I mean, I don't do a lot of long cooking recipes, and typically in doing so, I don't use dried fruit. The one living in Niagara for a lot of time, we cooked a lot with peaches and cherries. And I would say that if you're doing a mushroom gravy or a mushroom, not a gravy, but like a mushroom stock or sauce that you're using with meat, I would definitely say cherries would be great. I find peaches as a fresh fruit go really well with mushrooms in kind of like a warm, tepid salad. I enjoy those flavors together. But you gotta try it out because you know you're never gonna know what if you have your favorite fruit. I have my favorite fruit, and I think you kind of you experiment a little bit. But I don't think anything doesn't go together. It's just a matter of how you put it together and if it works for you. Is that good enough on the answers? We got thumbs up. Amazing. All right. So with the hedgehogs, they kind of break apart. They don't really. You can't really, I guess you can tear them, but because of the being called the spreaders, I just kind of break them up into pieces. Now, if you like to, you can obviously cut them, but you'll see when you cut them, you're going to end up with a lot of their little teeth, or the comb teeth here, falling all over the place. So I just kind of break them up, and then you can play with the textures that you want. So you can have the chanterelles, although they're in the cream, are going to have a discernible texture and shape. So you know what is what, because once they're cooked, they both taste a little bit similar. Texture is just a little bit different, so that's what we're playing with. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a Mornay. We're going to use more of our reduced cream. We're going to take some bread and get it all toasted. You want to make fresh bread, you go right ahead. You use sourdough in this instance. If you've just got some favorite multi-grain super seedy bread that you love at home, that'll work as well. Just stick it in your toaster and take this mushroom creamy mix and just put it on top. It's all good. So next pan here, where's that white one? Perfect. So I mentioned the word Mornay, and Mornay is typically based on a bechamel. But again, just for inclusive, we're not going to put any flour in this and make this a bechamel, which is why I've got the reduced cream, which will already have that inherent thick texture to it, and it won't take as long to get there. And we're just going to get this pan hot. So for this, we're going to take our hedgehogs, we're going to take our golden chanterelles, not with the white ones on this, we're going to use the goldens, and we're going to saute all this off. Similar, again, shallots, garlic, herbs, always your friend with mushrooms. You can't really go wrong, and once you try it at home, you're going to need to have shallots in the house because it's just that different, and it's pretty awesome. A substitute, if you can't get shallots in your area, is the Vidalia onion, a little bit sweeter. And a little bit bigger, maybe a little more cost effective, but it's definitely probably the closest that you can, but there's nothing really like a shallot once you start eating shallots. And for this one, instead of diced, I'm just gonna use small little pieces here. The reason being, it's a nice, interesting texture between the mushrooms. You get little bites and crunches out of it. Double that butter, please. Yeah. So, bechamel, leading mother sauce, a white sauce for cooking. Lots of different variations. You can go to the repertoire de cuisine and find your sauce tree and figure all that out. Mornay is with the inclusion of Gruyere. So that's, we're going to find that Gruyere, which is right here. If you can't find Gruyere, Emmental you could use Swiss, you could use cheddar and make a cheese sauce. I just find the tang of the Gruyere just lends itself obviously traditionally to the Mornay, but it's a whiter cheese and it looks a little bit less like mac and cheese if you're using cheddar, and it just goes really well with the mushrooms. So we've got our butter to frothing. We're going to add our shallots. And we're going to add a little bit of garlic. Again, we're not coloring any of this. It's a white sauce, so we don't want to add color to it. So we're going to cook that over just until it's translucent. Probably about, I don't know what the recipe says, but probably about 2 minutes, but just until translucent. Recipes are fun, and they're a great guideline for me. I just don't have them in front of me to know exactly what I'm putting in. So if there's any questions about that, the recipes work. What I'm doing here is kind of how I'm smelling, tasting, and cooking. Okay, so we've got the butter frothing. We're going to get all these mushrooms over in here. So the hedgehogs and chanterelles, you know, if you like, you know, someone was mentioning the seafood flavor of the lobster, you could totally do this with the lobsters. What I would suggest if you're going to do the lobsters is larger pieces, almost, and pan fry them so they're a little bit almost like pieces of fish, and you can put that right on the bread that you're going to cook, and the sauce will go over that. So again, Mornay sauce, you could just build that and have that in your fridge. Pantries are key because you never know what you're going to reach for, right? So, you know, when I'm cooking mushrooms, I like to have a vinegar that I really enjoy, sherry or apple cider. If I'm making the chanterelles and stuff like I talked about, simply put, when you shred the chanterelles, I'll make some a little bit later, just saute. As soon as that liquid comes out, that's when you're going to want to put your sauces in. And then the sauces will take all the liquor from the mushroom, and then it'll come back on and glaze, and you can just toss it, and we'll show that in a little bit. A nice good hot sauce. This is a Chipotle Cholula. Tamari, again, everybody's friend because it's not soy sauce. And then, yeah, so pantries are essential. I think it's good to any kitchen to have a good pantry. Good there? Perfect. All right. So we're going to let that go a little bit longer. That pan's not quite as hot as the cast iron. A little bit of time we're going to put into here. Salt. All right, so we'll cook that up. So for the bread, as I said, we've got a sourdough here. You can do whatever you'd like. Just a matter of your personal preference. And I think it's key to have it nice and thick, simply because you want to have something for the egg to sit on and something for the knife to cut through. Just for fun, remember that compound butter we made? we're gonna toast this, so you may as well just make some lobster bread or lobster garlic bread. We know what's in here. And I just want to show you the versatility of all these things. That's why I'm kind of, you know, robbing one recipe to pay the other recipe, just so you can see the idea of the cooking. Because once you have the lobster in your pantry, or the lobster butter in your pantry, or this kind of stuff in your pantry, you can use it pretty much everywhere, which is the idea. So I've got the oven on bake. I'm just going to bake the bread because I don't want it super crispy, because then, like I said, you can use a toaster, but we're just going to bake it because the crust will get too hard and it'll be too hard to chew. And we want a nice smooth texture because we want to highlight the mushrooms in this. So just going to go over this one. So you see all that liquor that's come out here. So the same stage I was talking, if I was going to make these barbecue, that's when I would put the barbecue sauce in and then let that reduce around the barbecue sauce, and it'll coat, the sugars of the barbecue sauce will coat all these mushrooms. But this is where I'm going to add my cream. And this is mushrooms on toast, which is creamy. So I'll show you this here. Just going to keep turning around this way. So you put the cream in there, and then that will also come down. You can see how the cream comes together really quickly. So I don't have to put flour in that, but if you know you got anybody eating with you that's not necessarily worried about flour, you can put it right in the mushrooms pre-cream. All right, and then we're just going to cook that down. Just about ready, yep. And then the trays are here. Put that bread in the oven just while everything's finishing here. And I'm not forgetting, but I haven't done them, is the poached eggs. So poached eggs, follow your favorite recipe, follow what you know. Temperature is key, and how you like to eat them is the way it is. Breakfast is the hardest dish to cook for anybody unless you know exactly how you like your eggs. So I'm going to poach the medium, probably about 2.5, 3 minutes, depending on the temperature of the water. You want it about 185 degrees if you're that into it, but ultimately not boiling, just before boiling. So boil is 212, so 185. You'll still see bubbles and things will move around, but it's not going to be rolling. So that's something we can get done while we're cooking the mushrooms down. Quiet group, eh? I wouldn't know.
Bruce, I didn't mention before, there's a couple people who commented on your lovely shirt.
Right?
Really impressed.
This is, you know, it was a gift, but all I know is that it was made in Vancouver, which is pretty awesome. So if you're in the Lower Mainland, you could probably find it there. I don't know where, but it was a gift and it's pretty awesome. Thank you. So we've got acidulated water, just a little bit of vinegar in the water, a little bit of salt, and again, we're going to get that just to a boil so you can see the bubbles. You can't, but I'm telling you, the bubbles are at the bottom of the pan. They're starting to come up, but the water itself isn't rolling. And you want to make sure you get a lot of motion in the water when you drop the egg in so that you really encapsulate the white in the heat so that you have a nice shaped poached egg. This one's right off. All right, so this sauce here, I'm just going to go here for a minute. You see the bubbles here. So if you were to put fresh cream in there, the bubbles would be a lot bigger and a lot more active. Because it's reduced and now it's already reduced by 40%, you see the bubbles are a little bit smaller and it almost looks like it's thickened already. And at that point, we're going to add the cheese in and then finish it with our herbs and such. So again, I don't know if you like cheese. You want your guests to like cheese as well. So just going to stir that through. The only thing I will say with the cheese, if you're going to, for example, make this ahead of time, you're going to want to use flour or some sort of thickener or hydrocolloid, just because the cheese itself will separate upon reheating. Whereas if you have the flour, it binds with the liquid and then you don't lose that viscosity of your sauce. All right, so my egg water is up and ready. So I'm just gonna take a spoon, give it a good stir, and then drop my eggs in. One at a time. All right.
One question, Bruce.
Sure.
What kind of cheese are you using right now?
That is Gruyere. Gruyere cheese is what we're using. So I'm going to show you now what happened. So I've stirred it in. The cheese is melted, nice and stringy, but you see how it comes off the bottom? When I do that, that's known as sauce consistency. So ultimately, when you're looking for a sauce, you want to make sure that when you drag your spoon through, it stays clear and then eventually comes in. So there you go. That's basically finished, except for what? Herbs. Chives. We've got the salt in there. Parsley. The thyme's already cooked in it. And you get a nice color, nice sheen. And if you wanted to, just for fun, because traditionally, whenever you finish a classical sauce, you always want a Monte au beurre, which is a knob of cold butter in there. You could probably put your lobster butter in there or just cold butter. All right, so we're just gonna have that on here. Hey? Yeah, sure. Yeah, put 2 nubs in there. 1, 2. Okay, so put the cold butter in there. Just gonna stir that through till it melts, and then your sauce is finished. You just stir that till it melts, please. Okay, so I've got about 45 seconds or so left on my eggs. Just gonna check my bread in here. All right, so, all right, it smells horrible. I'm just kidding. All right, so we'll assemble the dish here. Beautiful brunch plate. As you can see, what happens when you cook out the butter, the compound butter, you will see that all of the bits stay on top of there. Okay, so if that was chanterelles, you'd do the chanterelles, etc. Put anything you want in there. Compound butter is pretty amazing, and it's a great way to preserve mushrooms. Alternately, you could take that melted butter and put it into the freezer in ice cubes. There's so many different ways to preserve. It's really like, and the internet is there's so many people that have done this for so long. There's so many ways to do that. But the butter, for me in cooking, it's a pretty awesome way to sort of keep that flavor going through the season. All righty, so my eggs. Can you grab me the arugula, sweetie? Actually, it's right here. Never mind. Good. So, a little bit of arugula on the plate. Nice and simple. So I'll show you the eggs here. All right. So that's my egg, medium. Has some resistance, but when you crack that, the yolk is just going to fall right through, or rather roll right through. And if you like them more done, it's your breakfast. Put them on there like that. Okay, so the sauce here, nice and finished. You got the butter in there, nice and smooth. We're gonna spoon that right over, and it's gonna be great. So if you got 1 or 2 people that aren't a fan of cheese, what do? You just put the cheese right on top of the eggs or on top of the toast before you put that sauce on. But that's gonna be something. So that's your mushrooms on toast. Just decorate that up, and there you are. That smells pretty great. So that's, what do we got, 3 of 4.
Yes, yes, that does smell very great.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah, grab the shot. Perfect. Okay, so the last thing, again, versatility of mushrooms. This one, what I'll do right now is I'm going to make a couple different mushrooms in a style that will be suitable for this dish. So the tacos that we're going to use Hericium, which is which is this here. This is the coral variety. There's lion's mane, which looks it's the one that's used for medicinal as well, but it's quite tight, and the strings go quite long. See, these are a little bit smaller, so they call this a bear's beard as opposed to lion's mane because it looks a little bit more like a bear's beard than a lion's mane. Can you do me a favor here? Can you just go out to the truck and grab the Nestor's bag in the back? I've got some fresh ones there. Okay. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to do the chanterelles. We'll do a couple of different flavors. So with tacos, what I'm doing with the Hericium and the recipe that you have, again, instead of using regular flour, you have a lot of alternative flours. This is gram flour or chickpea flour. Typically, they would use this for a pakora. So I'm kind of going with the pakora flavor or the pakora idea with the Hericium, but in it is ancho chili, salt, pepper, and a little bit of dried lime zest. So that'll be the breading for the meat or fish for the tacos. So if we want to look at tacos for the masses, this would be your fish taco. This would be your chicken taco. So if you're looking for those flavors, that's kind of the way you'd want to play. Unfortunately, I haven't found a mushroom that really deals like to make a beef taco, but you don't really need them because mushrooms are great. And then I'll do a little bit of the cauliflower mushroom as well, just so we have some different textures. So speaking to this, we've talked about how to prepare this. Whenever you're harvesting these, they grow really, really clean. The trick is keeping them clean from when you go from the forest to your car. So ideally, wax paper is great. Bring some wax paper or some parchment paper or a separate bag. But no mushrooms really like plastic bags, so you always want sort of paper or cardboard in between. Newspaper works well, although the ink, I'll let you make a call on that. But wax paper works great. Wrap it into the bag. It's very delicate. I try and make a habit of going back to where this was after my foray into the woods. I come back towards the car and I pick this last and put it up on top of my bag when I come home. That way I keep it clean. It doesn't really lend itself to a lot of water because it's so delicate, so that's why you want to keep it as clean as possible. Cauliflower, on the other hand, it grows up. And if you look at the structure on the bottom of it, thank you. When you look at the structure on the bottom of it, you can see why they call it cauliflower. You can see the way things go. When it grows, there's very little dirt. When the dirt is captured, it's down in here. So you don't want to wash it this way because the dirt has always hit it this way. So you want to break it apart like that and have the dirt fall out as you break it off. Does that make sense? And then that way you can see the little bit of, because there won't be much in there, the odd fly, the odd piece of moss or something, but they're pretty clean mushroom ultimately. So those two particularly, you want to make sure that you keep as clean as possible when you go. So if you're going with somebody, get them to carry that and you can carry all the other stuff. And these are just freshly picked, so I'll show you. So this just came off of a log, just a small one, but they're gonna freeze pretty soon up here anyway. So you can just see it grows right from the wood. So you're just gonna cut that off. So took a little bit too much wood on that, but it was quite a rotting tree. And that's gonna be our fish. So tacos, what are we gonna do? We've got corn tortillas. We're gonna heat those up. We're gonna make a nice fresh cabbage. I'm gonna get some of this stuff out of the way because we're done with all of the shallots and herbs. Any questions on that part so far? Just gonna get some stuff out of the way for you. Yeah, the cheese can go back in, thank you. Okay, so as we said, we're gonna do this one here. You got one more bowl? Sweet. Yeah, thank you. With this, the Hericium, perfect. That's probably a good bite size, okay? When we cook these, if you have a deep fryer at home, you can deep fry them once we batter them. I particularly like using a cast iron pan. And the reason I do, again, is because it keeps its heat. And we want to make sure that we are always pushing the moisture towards the center rather than having it come out, especially with this. So we'll press it almost like a spatchcock idea where we push it down and crisp both sides at the same time with a spatula. and then we can flip it, which will give us that nice crispy fish texture. And all of these will be flattened, so it'll be like little flaky fish bites. So we want it about that big. So similar to a cauliflower floret that you would have on like on a vegetable plate. And this would be like the last minute. So I'm gonna get this all ready. Just bits like that. And then we're gonna dredge them in the flour. Hopefully I have an answer.
Okay, a question for you. Can the cauliflower or bear's beard mushrooms ever get confused with other non-edible mushrooms in the forest, or are they pretty unique?
The cauliflower or spiraceus, I would say, is unique. There is a, there is a ramiria, or the coral mushroom, that a lot of people at first sight might confuse them. But if you actually look at several pictures of the cauliflower and several pictures of the coral, you'll notice a distinct difference. They both kind of grow the same way, but coral is very much more upright and looks a little bit more like coral you would see under the water, where this looks a little bit more like cauliflower and has individual fronds, and these will get longer as the mushroom grows. So the bigger it is, the more delicate. And so the bear's beard, I think if you can figure out and nail down Hericium, I think there's 3 varieties that grow around here, all of which are edible. Again, it is a sponge, and it does take substrate, or it takes minerals and chemicals and whatever from the ground. So if it's growing on the side of the road and the tree's been there for 8 months, you probably don't want to eat it right on the side of the road, simply because it'll take whatever sort of toxins have been spewed onto that tree and pull it into the mushroom. So it's just safer to eat stuff farther and deeper into the forest. But cauliflower, I haven't seen anything other than the coral, which people confuse the two. And then this Hericium, I mean, you can do all the research you want online, but again, it's specifically, once you see one growing, you'll be like, okay, that's that, right? It doesn't look like anything else. But you always want to make sure you know before you eat. I don't want to tell you to eat anything you find, but you know, there's enough research and enough people you could probably ask to get that. Hey, you know, my buddy, like, is this a Hericium? Yeah, it looks pretty good. Bring it by and we can have a look, and it's discernible for sure. Does that answer your question fair enough? So dry into the flour, because again, the mushroom has moisture all in it. It's quite moist. So that's going to pick up all of the flour that we need. And we're just going to go and put it all in there. And when you're dredging something in flour, you always want to give it, say, 30 seconds to a minute, just to sort of collect and hold and sort of like take the flour and sort of seize it onto it, so that it actually provides a nice crust when you're frying it. All right, so I'm just going to do this many. Is that hot yet? Yeah. Perfect. Butter, okay, perfect. So while we're doing this, can you just do me a favor and warm 3 or 4 of these tortillas in the oven? Breading or flouring anything is never really a clean affair, not as much as you'd like it to be. Towels right there. Okay, so they're all floured up. We're just going to let them sit for a little bit. And as mentioned, again, nice and simple, just pull this all apart. These I've done successfully quite well. I mean, basically like this, you fry them when all the moisture comes out, hit it with your taco seasoning or your favorite kind of Mexican spices, let it all come together and the moisture go back. Leave about 30% of the moisture in the pan, and then let it cool down and freeze that in bags. And anytime you want taco night, you just pull that out and heat it up. It's pretty great. You don't really get as much with the Hericium. I know there's ways to freeze them. Because they're so great fresh, I don't do a lot of preserving with them. I usually just share them with friends and potentially dry them for later use.
I have a comment for you, Bruce.
Okay.
Someone writes, there are so many wonderful general cooking hints. Thank you.
No trouble. So we've got the butter nice and brown. So this one, a little bit nutty. It'll just help with the flavor there. I've got it all in one level. Just going to show you here. So again, you can deep fry it. We've got one level, and I'm going to press that all down with a spatula for one side. It'll golden brown on one side, and then we'll flip it all. Large cooking utensil? I just need spatula. So just a simple thing like this, and all we're going to do, if you can see me here, just going to press that down. You'll hear the sizzle. If you got another pan or a weight or something, you can put that down. And it gets a little dry here, so we're just going to drop a little bit of olive oil in there. So this is why it lends itself to deep frying as well. And you're not going to get as much moisture out of this one because you're dry frying it and you're pressing it. So you're trying to get it nice and crisp rather than let it leach out because the flavor's already in the breading. And you can't smell it, but that graham flour has a beautiful, or the chickpea flour has a beautiful nuttiness to it. And with the butter, yeah, it's kind of, does smell like popcorn. That's the browning butter. So I'm going to press this down on this side. I don't know if you can hear the sizzle, but that's what you're looking for. You want that nice and crisp. And we'll turn that off. So if you want, you can get all your taco stuff ready to go. But ultimately, if you take a look here, nice and golden crisp, that graham flour already has a nice golden color, crisp on both sides. And then when you bite into that, all the small little fronds of that hericium are just going to break apart in your mouth. So I hope you can find the hericium. I know sometimes if you go to a supplier like Ponderosa, they have things called pom-pom, which are a farmed lion's mane. And if you can find them at a specialty store, that's something else you could find if you're not as fortunate enough to find the hericium in the wild. All righty. Yeah, we'll take the tacos out. Tacos, tacos. So we are doing pretty good. Now we're going to get everything together for the tacos. So we got the taco shells coming out. And they're corn, so again, you can use flour, you can make burritos, you can do whatever with the flavors on this. And I'm just going to cover them with a towel so they stay nice and, I guess I put that right in my picture, didn't I? Put that back there, I'll do that in a moment. So cilantro, love or hate, I can't really live without it. Lime, jalapeno, and this cabbage is in there. Yeah, perfect, thank you. No, it's okay. So then we just got some fresh cabbage. I'm just gonna lay it out just on the flat here. Thank you. Chop all these off. You can use these in recipes and stuff. I just, for this intents and purpose, I just want the chopped fresh stuff here. Can you clear that flour stuff away from me? Yep. Okay, so you can garnish fresh or you can just mix it all in. Nice and easy, just make a nice sort of fresh, almost like coleslaw, and then just put it in, put the mushroom on top, and you're good to go. Small bowl. You scoop some of this out. And we're going to make some sauce out of that. So, anybody too upset about cilantro? I don't think I'm too worried about having too much. But you see, so with the cabbage, I mean, you don't need to marinate it. You don't need to make it coleslaw, but I like to, just before I want to put my lime juice and seasonings and everything into that. Yeah?
A question came in. Did you say lime zest in the flour mix?
Yeah, dried lime zest. So if you take a zester and you take it off, you can do it with lemon, lime. Again, it's a pantry trick. So lemon, lime, orange. If you're going to juice oranges and you have a zester, take it all off, dry it up, and then you can put it in flavorings, or sorry, in breadings, or you can also take it and put it into sugars for desserts and stuff. It's just a great, instead of throwing it out, just zest your limes or lemons and oranges, all your citrus fruit, and keep the dried zest. It's nice to have in. And yeah, so it was ancho, salt, pepper, dried chilies, and dried lime zest with the garum flour, or you could use cake flour as per the recipe. So for the limes here, just gonna cut here. When you're cutting limes for juicing, I mean, I'm sure you've all watched Food Network, you all know this. Roll it a little bit and cut on a longer bias. And the reason you cut on a longer bias is just you've got like, you open up the wedges a little bit more. So it's a lot easier to squeeze with your hand instead of having to use a juicer all the time. Okay, that's the lime juice in there. And then jalapenos. Pardon me. Now, if you've got friends that might not like jalapenos, obviously you don't have to put them on. We can put it on the finished taco. And for the sauce, mayonnaise, veganese, whichever you like to do. This is where I've got the chipotle cholula. A little bit of that in there. And some lime juice. And just mix that through. So it's just a nice, simple sauce. You can put whatever you like. If you've got your favorite hot sauce, if you've got your favorite taco sauce, go ahead and do whatever you'd like. You want it to smooth out a little bit, so I'm gonna add probably a little bit more lime juice and a little bit more hot sauce in that, just so I get a little bit more of a pouring consistency. A little bit more hot sauce. You know, weird to work to one camera to the next. You good? Awesome. Okay, so we are ready to assemble. And final plate. I use that one, yeah, sure. Okay, so we've got our shell, pretty straightforward. We're gonna grab a little bit of this here, mix that through just a little bit more. Nice and down the center. Some of these wonderful, oh, I got fork. So I'll just show you in the other camera in a quick second, just so you can see what it looks like. All right, so you got your cabbage and slaw. You got your wonderful hot peppers. And you can just put a little bit of that sauce right across the top like that. And that's taco. So we made pretty good time. I've completed all the recipes. Normally we would all be eating it together and be able to discuss how wonderful it smells and how great it tastes and what could we do other than that. But I want to wish you well with finding mushrooms. I would like you to hopefully be able to enjoy the recipes. And if you have any questions, now's a great time. And just thanks for coming.
Well, we'll wait a couple minutes to see if people are just typing. But just Bruce, so lucky to be in the room with you today. Everything is smelling just amazing, and we're so lucky to have you back again in this unique situation. So
wonderful. Well, one thing during COVID is you can get outside, so hopefully you enjoy it and find your bounty out there and have some fun with it now.
So we have a lot of thank yous coming in as
amazing.
Comments. And you need to have your own Food Network show, someone says.
Mushrooms and me.
Oh, and someone says, thanks so mushroom.
Oh, that's great. I can't tell you how much that means to me.
Okay, so just reminding everybody that if those recipes that Bruce talked about are on the Whistler Naturalists webpage, if you go to the Fungus Among Us page, and you'll see Bruce at Milestones, although he won't
awesome.
cook these beautiful mushrooms there, but thank you again so much, Bruce.
Appreciate it. Thanks all for coming.
Really appreciate you here. Thank you.
See you
Bye.
next year. Hopefully in person.
Hopefully.